Hey guys, Cosmic here of Six Sages Gaming, and welcome back to another Argent Saga video. Today we're going to be covering the light intro deck, but before I get into that, before this video series really begins, I do want to add a small disclaimer. At the time of recording this, the template of the cards themselves, along with either some artwork or some wording, is not 100% finalized to my knowledge, so bear in mind that these might change slightly, or if for whatever reason a card gets removed or what have you. It's very early on and this isn't set in stone yet. There might be a few changes, but we are going to talk about this as it stands today. But, I don't expect any major changes. I just wanted to add that disclaimer up front in case sometime down the road you might be watching this video and understand why something has changed. The other thing I want to cover briefly is that this weekend I will be recording a proper how to play video with live action decks. We have all 5 decks, intro decks that is, thanks to Alter Reality Games, so thank you very much for sending that over, and a very beautiful cloth mat. If you are in Michigan and looking for demos, please make sure to drop a comment below and I'll be happy to reach out to either you directly or a store in your area to set something up. Alright, enough of that out of the way. Let's talk about the front cards, the ones that are always going to be on the table and really make up the starting position for your deck. So if you haven't watched our previous video on what makes up a deck or the win condition, definitely make sure to check that out first. I don't want to spend too much time in these videos going over them in detail. So we have the first light champion, Liam, Trader of Knights. What I really like about this card is there is a lot of gear synergy, which you'll see in a little bit, but also gives us a pretty good idea of what this element wants to be doing or color in this first set. So if you destroyed an opponent's tower, you can add 1 gear from your deck to your hand. Now immediately the first question that comes to mind is how good is gear going to be, right? In terms of Magic, which is primarily my biggest background, is going to be things like artifacts or equipment cost, right? These are things that, depending on when you played Magic or how good or bad they were at the time, you either have a very strong opinion of this card in the sense of maybe Jete comes to mind, or a very bad sense of the card where equipments either didn't see any play at all or were very small splash in the meta. So this is a card that I think really is going to obviously help the intro light deck itself, but I'm really curious to see what set 1 brings, to see how much this tutor effect is going to be relevant. Now, keeping in mind that you do need to destroy all 5 towers, then attack 1 more time. So this does, say tutor 5 times before you win. So I do like the, deck thinning at the very least. Now that's pretty good by itself. On top of that, we also have a once per turn during either player's turn, you can discard 1 gear from your hand. Target unit gets plus 500 this turn. So this is going to combo with cards you're going to see a little bit later that will give you target attack or just a very common battle trick. Now your opponent is going to be aware if you tutor and then pass, right? You're going to have that plus 500. Maybe they're going to be less inclined to target one of your creatures, but that might be exactly what you want them to do. So I really do love the flexibility that this champion has very early on. And yes, this was one of the first cards spoiled that we got to see. After that, we have the Spirit, which, keep in mind, is really the dual color functions of this game. So the top left corner means if you put this compared to a red champion, you can have 0 or 8 light cards in your deck. There's no in between. It has to be 0 or 8. So obviously if you're playing a off color Spirit, if you will, you're going to be including 8 cards of that color, right? There's no other reason why you would do it unless it's a blue Spirit, but I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later. So Sola, at the end of your turn, you can switch one of your exhausted units to active. This is really important because in this game, in Argent Saga, if one of your opponent's units is exhausted, you can attack it. So if I have a 1500 power creature and you have a 1000 power exhausted creature, I'm going to attack your creature and remove it. This really does give you a little bit more survivability or a little bit more durability in your units because you can save them at least 1 right at the end of your turn. Interesting to see how this is going to work out, but all the spirits do have a soul burst ability as well. This is a one-time use effect, and then flipping the card face down more or less exiles it. There was some comments made in terms of there's going to be possibly effects that would flip it back up and maybe you get to reuse that effect, but anytime you get something free, right? Both of these cards are on the table from the moment you draw your opening hand and are just freebies. So they really do have to be careful about how they balance these now and in the future. And I'm curious to see what type of space they go into from a card design perspective. So if you Soul Burst Sola, you get to put a Knight unit token with Guardian into play. It is a 2,000 power, which 2,000 is decent, might buy you an extra turn. Also worth noting here that sometimes you're just going to need an extra attack, and that works out just as well. Moving on, we did discuss that, hey, we want to be playing gear cards, and well, here are some of those as an example. Standard Shard Armor, you get to, again, all these are going to be equipped to a unit, right? It's an equip effect itself, and the word gear makes sense. If you would take damage, you can sacrifice this card and prevent that damage instead. For one, pretty good utility. Again, you can tutor it up. Maybe you just want to save your guy from a turn. Damage or replacement or survival effects usually are fairly decent in card games, and especially if you have a Guardian unit, which is really good. Maybe you put this on them, you can get 2 blocks successfully before it dies, right? You exhaust, then it gets blocked, and they try to swing into it to pop off the armor. Gives you a little bit more life in your cards. The one I really like, though, is the Standard Shard Sword. Again, all these are 1 cost. Put it on a unit, plus 500 and target attack. So this is really great at a start of a turn where your opponent played a couple things if they didn't have quickness, right? So they can't attack right away. You are now in a position where, out of nowhere, in my air quotes that I'm making, you can put this on, give you a power advantage, right? If it's 1,000 to 1,000, you immediately become a 1,500, and then you have target attack, so you can attack the card that they just played. Of course, there's always going to be the other side of this as well, where, hey, now your guy is exhausted, so they could swing into it, but keep in mind, your spirit does recover that unit at the end of the turn, so there is a little bit of interaction that you can do here and a little bit more play. Target attack is something that has always been strong in things like Force of Will, or if we think about Kaijudo, Dragonborn, those types of games where we are limited in units and they are such an important resource that I expect this to be a very strong keyword as we go forward, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this plays out in the first set. Then the last one that we had, so again, we had armor, we have a sword, and why not, we have a shield as well. This one is another one that I really like because it can give anything Guardian, and when it uses Guardian, again, that means to intercept a block, so opponent declares an attacker, they're going for a tower, you say, oh no, this guy has Guardian, you have to attack him. He's also going to get plus 1,000, and plus 1,000 is a significant boost in power, so this can create some interesting turns as well. Going into some units, so again, these are going to be the creatures, monsters, whichever term you want to use here, obviously unit preferably, that are going to be attacking the towers. And right away, you'll notice that there is a lot more gear synergy going on. So for our 3-drop, we have Quorum Craftsman, 1,500 power. When it arrives, you can add 1 gear from your deck to your hand. Again, deck thinning, tutoring. I'm really curious to see, this isn't restricted, so all the gears that we just talked about may be 1 cost, but this is a card that set 2, set 3, set 4, whatever it might be, they have to be very cautious about what they print because otherwise it's just a very strong tutor. Then we have Quorum Rampart as a 2-drop. This unit gets plus 500 for each gear equipped to it. This would be a typical Voltron strategy, and if you're not familiar with that term, it really means a all-in or all-in-one unit. So in this case, you could think about those previous gears we talked about. You equip the one that lets him take double damage is what I'm just going to call it, right? You put on the armor, they take lethal, the armor comes off, you have to attack him again. That's going to give him plus 500 for just putting it on him. All of a sudden, the sword is going to give him plus 1,000 in target attack. Excuse me. A 3-drop 2k with target attack that can also then get further buffed by your champion. Seems pretty good. And then as we get more gear, it's going to be really interesting to see how this card shakes out. Locke is an interesting one. So we are starting to get into the higher curve here at 5 with a 2,500 power. It has quickness, so haste, swiftness, all those other terms you've seen before. It comes into play, can attack right away. And use abilities, important to note here for future cards, but this is just, when it attacks. When this card attacks, you equip a gear from your hand to this card. So same thing with the Craftsman, right? Potentially very powerful effect. As of right now, you're only going to get a value of 1 out of it based on the gears that we've seen. But down the road, if we do, a Quorum Craftsman, search up a, let's just say, 8-drop gear, then we play Locke and get to swing. We get to just get a sane amount of value generated from him, assuming that 8-cost gear is going to do, something worthy of it being a cost of 8. So it's again, very interesting to see how these cards, today don't have a limit. And I'm really curious to see where this shakes out. Again, set 2, or I should say year 1, year 2, whatever it is. It's definitely a card that I'm going to put off into a pile that says, okay, at every set review, let's go to this card. Did this get better? And it's going to be really interesting. I'll probably get foils of it if possible. They haven't discussed what the intro foils are going to be exactly, but that'd be a really nice one to have as a foil or a promo. Moving on from that, we have V, Giver of Light, a 1-drop 500 with an arrive effect. So that's an enter the battlefield. If you're familiar with other card games, sacrifice this card, target light unit gets plus 500 this turn. It's an on-field battle trick, and I'm not the biggest fan of it because it's 500, and if you guys missed the other video, the towers have a base defense of 1,000. So if you were to make this card more aggressive, right, if you want to attack and try to break a tower, you know, at a minimum, you would have to discard a gear from your hand or equip it to make if you have a sword, for example, to make it 1,000. What is interesting, though, is the arrive effect, right? So send 1 gear from your deck to the discard zone. And then we have this wonderful guy, Quorum Blade Master, who is going to then get the gear from our discard zone and equip it to him directly. So you can see how these two cards are going to play with one another and interact. Now, again, I think this is one of those cases where it's probably fine for the intro deck, and it's a great starter point to really build out the synergy for, again, gears and for light. But where does this combo stand in set 1? You know, how good is gear going to be? Are people going to go for a more streamlined, you know, just natural units that are big and have value and maybe some guardian? Because if you put too many gears in your deck, you're going to flood out on them and have, you know, yes, it's nice to a point to be able to pitch them and get plus 500 with a limiter of, you know, once a turn. But you need to draw units to attack, right? So if you have too few, you can't get your synergy. If you have too many, you are going to be drawing very few units to actually attack with. So it's definitely a careful balance that you need to strike between each of these considerations. I'm really curious to see, you know, how many gears are you going to be putting in a deck? So right now it's 9, and that does seem a little bit high, but who knows? Let's give it till set 1 before we make any final judgments on it. Moving on from there, we have a few additional units. The Quorum Squire, which is a nice 1-drop 1,000. So this is more of your vanilla standpoint, right? So where you're able to potentially break a tower, right? They're either 1,000 power or 1,500. But now this is a case where a single equipment, either way, is going to make this 1-drop a very aggressive 1-drop. Here we see another keyword, Ruin. When this card is destroyed or sacrificed, add 1 gear with cost 1 or less from your deck to your hand. So now this is interesting. This is the first case where we do see a limiting effect on the card itself, where the others have just been freebies, right? To no restriction, all out, have fun with it. That said, I think for the intro deck, this is a very strong card. And if these gears are going to be, you know, consistently in this lower cost, perhaps even 1, this card is going to get you a good amount of value, right? Because you're going to get the battle trick out of it. If you discard 1, get another gear. When he dies, put it back to your hand, you know, and then with the previous cards, we just get from discard to hand. There's a few different things that you can do in terms of thinning out your deck, which is the most important thing when you're hitting them with your champion, or you're hitting with the units and your champion is triggering, and then discarding them or getting them back through recursion other ways. And then on top of that, again, we have an assassin with a 4-drop quickness. So very interesting. This caught my mind is now we have 2 cards in light that have quickness, which is typically a red effect, right? Or fire, hasty boys. But very nice to see it going into other colors here. It has an arrive effect. You can sacrifice a gear you control to destroy target unit your opponent controls. So again, we think about these cards that, you know, you get to put on them for free or put them into play off of Locke. Maybe you get an effect, you get a target attack, or just plus the power in that case because you have to declare the attacker first. You kill something, you bring in the Quorum Assassin post-combat, you break off the other gear, then he has quickness, so maybe they had a blocker left that they were keeping up. Well, Assassin comes in, kills the last blocker, it has quickness, it's going to attack, and it gets in for a tower, or again, the final point of lethal. So this is a card that, up until this point, you know, deck thinning and the gears, I'm sure, are certainly good enough by themselves and with the packages that are available, but in my mind, this Assassin is really what helps bring it together and can give you a bit more reach out of them when it gets to that mid or late game where you just really need to remove a few cards. The Quorum Phalanx here, 2-drop 1,500, has Guardian. Nothing really to write home about here other than the fact that it can exhaust and make something attack it instead. Again, if you just need to save a tower, or if you have a guy that has, I think it's Destroyer off the top of my head again, double break, as I'm always going to refer to it as. So when they attack, they destroy 2 towers instead of 1. This can help survive you from that. So there's a bit of utility here in the card of just having 1, he can break towers, and 2, he can intercept when needed. One of the things that I do absolutely love, and it's always been good in other trading card games, and I just have to imagine it's going to be here good here as well, is Holy Slash. This is another case where we see another keyword. Yes, spoiler, it's intro decks. So there are going to be a lot of keywords. And I'm sure that, by set 2 or set 3, it's going to be shortened to just Instacast. It'll have the effect after it just to make the template a little bit cleaner here. Destroy target attacking unit. So 2-drop, it has to be an instance, right? Because you're killing a target attacking unit, but it gives you flexibility, and it's just a key removal spell when you need it. In my mind, where I go to this is having a blue deck or a black deck that has a few different other either recursion spells or a couple kill spells, but then you just really bring in, your light spirit in this case, throw in the holy slash, make sure you have a few more outs to combat tricks where it can be really punishing on the back end where they say, okay, well, I'm going to attack with this, I'll get a couple towers, and then I'll play other stuff. They say, well, no, I'm going to stop you before you even do that, and make sure you don't get the value off that last attack. Or again, if it is their last attacker, you just kill it and you move on with your life. So this is a very, very strong card in my opinion. I'm looking forward to how it shakes out. The other reason why this is so important is because there is a field limit in Argent Saga, so you can only have 5 creatures at a time. And if you haven't seen it on a mat yet, that is why you see the 5 zones and the 5 units and the 5 towers, 1 and 1. It's not that you can only attack across or anything like that. It's strictly just because there's a limit of 5 units in play. So this is going to remove something at some time, and it's going to feel good. Then we have for our one of, right? So every intro deck does have this tower boosting effect. I guess we don't really have a proper name for it, but basically a conditional effect once a tower of their color is removed. And what's really interesting, and I honestly missed this at the first read of this because to me it would be natural to assume it's only your own. All of these cards that say, when a X tower is destroyed, it is both yours and your opponent's. So there is a bit of a bonus here, and we'll talk about this more when we get to water, about playing a little bit aggressively, right? Like finding that light tower so you can get this effect. 3,000 power is pretty beefy. It has Guardian, so it can intercept, and then when it has its Arrive effect, right, if a light tower is broken on either side, switch up to 2 exhausted light units to active. This is so strong. It's saving your team, right? You swing out, maybe they hit a fire tower, you're down to just 2 guys, you bring them back up, and then the next turn you're ready to swing out again. So it really is just an all-around great utility unit. Now these are a one of, which breaks my heart a little bit. Again, we're recording this very early on. I have not had the chance to sit down and play extensively at all, but based on what I've seen in the intro decks so far, I want 2 of these, maybe even a third in case of the water one, or the blue one, I'll just call it. So is it going to stay, at 2 and 3 copies? I'm not sure, but at least is worth considering how good these are going to be. Yes, it is conditional, but some of these have a just absolutely insane ability. Now, last section I'm going to end this with, and I do talk about it quite a bit as we're going through this video, but I do want to at least highlight, the tips and tricks. And some of these, yes, are going to be extremely straightforward in the case, right? We've talked about this interaction as we're going throughout this entire video, and it's just how the intro deck itself wants to be played out. The fire one is really interesting, I'll say, and I'm sure other people have picked up on it by now since I'm a little late to recording it, but we'll see what other tips and tricks you can find in the next videos. So, right, let's start with Liam. We've talked about this. Once per turn, you get to discard a gear, give something plus 500 attack. The Shard Sword has target attack, which means you can, target anything on your opponent's field, exhausted or not, and you can hit it directly. It also gets plus 500, and then we have the Blade Master, who is usually going to get this for free. So generally what you want to be doing as this whole trio plays out, you have some, 1,000 power units, turn 3. You swing at your opponent's rested guy, say, okay, I'm going to buff it by discarding the Shard Sword, giving it plus 500. My guy survives, your guy dies. Your next turn, you're playing Blade Master, and then it's going to be going right on to him, making him a 3,000 power. And then once again, we can continue on this loop with either other cards where we get it from hand, or search the deck, put it into hand, discard it, play another Blade Master, or a variety of other things you could be doing with the gear card. So again, very straightforward, but it's still interesting to see how this all works together. And I'm really looking forward to what set 1 brings to either. Do we replace this? Do you think Liam gets moved out? Again, there are 5 additional champions that we are getting in set 1. I think it's as box toppers, if I remember correctly. So it's going to be interesting to see where this shakes out. So with that, I am at the end of the video. And what is your favorite card from the intro light deck. At least for me, it is going to be the Assassin. Again, that's another key card in this whole strategy system. You bring a card to your hand, Liam, use it to pitch, give something plus 500, kill something, you play the Blade Master, you put it into play, equip it to him, you attack. The next turn you play the Assassin, break off the gear that you just played, kill something else, it has quickness, and you're going to go in for attacks again. And that is some lightning, so we are definitely ending this recording. I hope you guys enjoyed this video of Argent Saga. I will be covering all 5 intro decks in a few turns, and don't forget this weekend I will be recording a video to teach you how to play, and I'll be going through the couple of different decks. So if you guys would definitely comment down below what 2 decks you want to see played against one another. I know Light and Fire has kind of done it a lot, so do you want to see Dark and Water, Fire and Wind? Let me know. I'd be more than happy to sleeve up 2 of those and get them on video for you as we're explaining through the turns. So that's it for me, guys, on this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time in the Sage's Sanctuary. See ya.